Assalamu alaikum. Guys, there is a lunch after that. Assalamu alaikum. Guys, the topic requires a little bit energy, but at the same time, it requires to really think through what we are doing, how we are spending our day, how we are doing businesses, how we are engaging with each other, how we are collaborating with each other. Infrastructure, when we talk about it, has got a very interesting dynamics. Infrastructure is a vulnerable to climate change. It's a contributor to the climate change at the same time. And it's a roadmap. Without infrastructure, we cannot talk about development. We can't talk about economic development. We can't talk about living and the livelihood stuff. And given where we are today in terms of the climate, there's a 40% of energy-related emissions are coming from the built infrastructure. 50% of the natural resources we are consuming for built infrastructure. And if we really want to achieve net zero, every new infrastructure which is built now from today to 2050 has to be sustainable. And 7% of the total building stock of the world have to start renovation towards the sustainability or a climate resilient infrastructure and also supporting that the climate agendas. Otherwise, that net zero is not going to get achieved. And when we talk about infrastructure, we are talking about big money. We are not talking about something which we can do in a very, very simple way. We have to be very innovative. We have to consider the climate impacts. And at the same time, we have to collaborate with somebody like these people who are sitting there, and we will get to know them better, how they are supporting not only in Pakistan, globally, the infrastructure development while considering the ESG and sustainability as one of a key criteria to develop that. So thank you very much for being here today. Bo, I'll start with you. If you can give a little bit overview about the organization, how it's evolving, what area you are focusing in Pakistan, outside Pakistan, so the audience can understand the overall scope of the work which you people are doing right now. So Bo, starting with you.
Thank you very much. Certainly a pleasure to be here, flying in from Kuala Lumpur yesterday. I'm from Malaysia, and I chair the board of directors of InfraZamin, an esteemed organization that was set up to spur infrastructure development in Pakistan. I'll leave to my colleagues on the panel to explain a little bit more of what they do. But just to take the task of setting the stage for the discussion this morning about climate and infrastructure. To my mind, such a discussion would not be complete without talking about finance and financing both climate resilience initiatives as well as building more infrastructure. So I think the common thread this morning at this panel would be how we are going to address the issue of financing both climate projects as well as infrastructure projects. We hear all too often here in Pakistan, or I do, and across the region, there are many reasons why things do not take off, right? No good projects is something we often hear. No money available, very, very common. But essentially, let me synthesize finance to something very simple to understand for many of you who are not in the financing field. Financing is available. It's money. Money is almost ubiquitously everywhere. Where it fails to show up in a project or a company is because it just doesn't flow there. And it does not flow because of one single point: confidence. All right? If interest rates are higher because of lack of confidence, it still flows and then you pay a higher rate. If like you know, in mature markets like in America, a consumer in America can borrow 30-year mortgages at fixed rates at below 3%, right? So money flows principally on the basis of confidence. And I think we heard this morning's session, a lot of discussion and a lot of insights were given by His Excellency, the Finance Minister, about recovering confidence, right? And I'd like to just end here to allow my fellow panelists to talk about what they do. And hopefully that sets the stage in your mind of what we're trying to do to make money flow with more confidence. And then I'm told I have the task of summarizing where we are today in terms of growth for Pakistan moving forward. Thank you.
Now, thank you very much. And I think you picked up a two key stream, like the money is available, but it will follow where people will have a confidence. So money availability is not an issue. It's how we really build that confidence and the trust. And Karen, that brings me to your side, equity markets. You are working a lot in terms of the equity side of it. So how you see the equity flowing in or coming in, particularly this kind of area where you are providing the enhanced credit and everything. So how people really understand that space, how you really engage them, and how you help them to really invest and make money out of it as well.
Sure. Thank you, Sajeed, and thank you, Hock, for the lovely introduction as well. My name is Karen Tsang-Hounsell. I lead business development for InfraCo Asia, which is part of the development arm of Private Infrastructure Development Group, PIDG or PIDG. And I want to take a step back just to explain perhaps the makeup of this panel today. You know, we've heard it before, infrastructure is the great enabler. We as a group are focused on the development of infrastructure to enable. And again, the crux of the issue really is the underinvestment. Sovereign balance sheets aren't big enough to fund, you know, all the infrastructure that is so needed. The gap is well documented. So what we really need to do is to bring in private sector capital. But there are issues around risk and confidence, or a lack thereof. So this is where the role of PIDG as a group comes in. We are funded by a number of governments, namely the UK, Australia, Switzerland, and the Netherlands, amongst others. And we are one group that has multiple solutions. And we use the word solutions because our culture is very much about finding solutions. We are there to seek solutions together in partnership. Across the group, our products include equity, which is where I sit, and we also have members of our guarantees team as well as our technical assistance team, and they will tell you more about that in a bit. But I also wanted to share a headline mobilisation ratio, which Laith from our guarantee company shared earlier in his keynote speech. In case you missed it, I think if you're going to take one thing away, when we invest, we are able to bring in 5 times as much private capital as we have invested. How do we do that? So this is the question. And I think the term that's often used is blended finance. And this is where government funding can come in, and we use different structures to share the risk in appropriate ways to attract further capital to come into projects. So we've been doing this in Pakistan as a group for over 12 years. We have experience where we have pioneered wind in the Sindh province here. We're also very active in rooftop solar across a number of companies, and we're very proud to be a sponsor of InfraZamin Pakistan as well. In terms of the equity investment, we work in partnership with often local companies who are developers, who have a track record, who have experience and have the local networks. We bring, the government credibility, we bring international expertise, we work to international standards, and we will, work to capacity build, to educate, and to help implement projects to a standard such that they are sustainable and that the value is created in the long term. I can talk more about it later, but I might just stop there to allow my colleagues to also speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Mobilizing private capital, and Philip, you bring a very interesting perspective around the guarantees, how the guarantees really help within the local economy to support that mobilization and provide certain credibility or a credit enhancement facility. So if you can explain one thing around the guarantee, like how that contingent capital work. Number two, I would like you to touch upon this infrastructure has got the entire mechanism which you are deploying. It has got sustainability as an underlying principle. And that's not only the social side, it has got the environment side, it got the governance side. So how you see the additional ROI coming from something which the Paris Agreement has also suggested in terms of the carbon credit and additional ROI coming if we do the things in a right way. So if you can just pick up on the guarantee and then how the Paris Agreement can help to create that additional ROI for those projects.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me now. So I've been working in Pakistan since 2017, traveling here 2 or 3 times a year, and it has been an immensely rewarding journey. But I'd like to share with you a few observations of the trends that I've witnessed and compare them perhaps to the over 22, 23 countries that GuarantCo and the 40 plus countries that the Private Infrastructure Development Group is invested in. Pakistan is not unique in its currency challenges, okay? But they are particularly acute here. And for any investor investing into infrastructure, they are always on the hunt, well, developers rather, are always on the hunt for hard currency, because typically a lot of the CapEx components are priced in hard currency, and they're looking to seek to raise hard currency to fund these projects. So it is a natural thing to try and court international investors who can bring US dollars into Pakistan. However, that hard currency can bring challenges. It can accentuate existing problems. And what we have therefore aimed to do at GuarantCo is to mobilize the local currency markets. So we have focused on mobilizing domestic sources of capital, be it through the bond markets or the bank markets, by using our guarantee as a form of credit enhancement, move capital into projects where it would otherwise not be willing to invest. And again, this is not unique internationally. But what is unique, I think, about Pakistan is the size of this market. And that is not to be underestimated. The size and the sophistication that comes with it. The sheer depth of talent, the sheer depth of understanding of complex structured finance projects in this market is far beyond most of the countries that we operate in. And that puts Pakistan in a very, very strong position to be doing more with its local currency markets. Let me bring you a couple of examples of successes from other markets which we've transacted in to give you some inspiration. So, as mentioned earlier by my CEO, Laith Al-Falaki, we set up our first credit enhancement facility in Nigeria called InfraCredit back in 2016. Now, they guaranteed the first 10-year infrastructure bond in 2017. 2 years later, the first 15-year infrastructure bond. 2 years later, 2021, the first 20-year infrastructure bond on the back of a guarantee product. And that same year, we saw private sector investors going into a 10-year bond with no guarantee at all. Okay? So these instruments have the power to mobilize the private sector, to mobilize pools of capital that are there, and get capital flowing to instill the confidence that Hock is talking about into particular asset classes. Similarly, in Kenya, we saw capital markets on the corporate bond side had been completely dead for over 3 years. No one had come to market, no one had issued. GuarantCo comes along, we provide a 50% guarantee to East Africa's first green bond. And subsequently, we've seen a number of issuances in the market from corporate issuers, again demonstrating that there are pools of capital there that do not have to expose projects to foreign exchange risk, but can instill confidence and mobilize much needed funding into infrastructure projects. I would like to talk about the nature and climate side and carbon market side of things, but I'm also conscious of time, and maybe I'll come back to that bit in this later on.
No, thank you. I think where Philip left is that when we are talking about the nature-based solutions and all that, and then sustainability, building that sustainability within these financial instruments, and then designing the financial instrument itself, it's require a lot of technical assistance and the capacity building and the technical knowledge. And while working in the organization, which is in a different legal structure, which have a different priorities, keeping everybody abreast of that changes, as well as guiding the client to follow on those commitments, how it come across while, Emilio, you are working with internal team and as well as working with the client side of it?
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Emilio Cattaneo, and I run the technical assistance team in PIDG. You've heard from my colleagues about some of the instruments that PIDG is able to deploy to bring challenging and impactful infrastructure projects to completion and operation. And within the suite of blended finance instrument that PIDG is able to provide, we have our technical assistance offering, which in many cases is fundamental and catalytic in ensuring that projects are structured successfully, particularly in the context of ensuring that they have very positive climate impact and that they are constructed in a resilient and sustainable way. What is technical assistance? I mean, what do we include within that toolkit? We're fortunate enough to be able to receive from our donors a pot of money which we can deploy either as grants or as highly concessional debt or equity, so highly subsidized financing, to often deploy relatively small amounts of money at the very early stage of project development in order to ensure that that particular project is structured in a way which further down the line as the feasibility of the project is developed, it's structured in a way which is going to lead to it being investable and bankable. And we do that right from the beginning. I mean, the minister earlier spoke about PPPs and privatization and having to push more of the public sector assets into the private sector. We've had some interesting experiences and very fulfilling experiences in working with PPP departments around some of the markets where we operate, where we've provided some funding, what we call upstream at the very early stage, to help government ministries and PPP departments to basically create the right frameworks for investment, private investment in a particular sector or in a particular asset. And we think this is very, very catalytic, because if you structure those tenders for assets to be privatized in a very well-governed, transparent way, you very often get very much demand for those assets from private sector bidders. And ultimately, those same bidders will develop the asset and provide, very efficient, very cost-effective services to the consumers that will be using a water treatment plant, a power plant, a transportation asset, and so on. So we tend to work mostly through the PIDG companies. We work to support the projects that are being developed by our colleagues who are represented here, for the companies that are represented here today. And to give you a few examples of the things that we've done in Pakistan, I think our major activity in Pakistan over the last few years was really providing the catalytic funding to create InfraZamin. We provided a grant which was basically used to set up the company, to incorporate it, to structure all the contracts that were required for it to be operational. And that's quite an interesting grant, because much of our grant-making activities involve an element of repayment or reimbursability. So in fact, the grant that was provided to set up InfraZamin was subsequently repaid once the company was set up, which allows us to then redeploy that funding into other ventures. And particularly, we've been able to recycle those funds into other activities here in Pakistan. And just to give you a few examples of some of the things that we've done in the last 12 to 18 months, We've again been very active working closely with Maheen and her team in providing some grant funding to cover some of the more expensive transaction costs which are incurred in the guarantee process, particularly being that it's a relatively new product for the market. InfraZamin is a relatively young company. Some support can be provided to pay for some of the transactional costs, for example, on the multi-net guarantee, which was the first project that InfraZamin did. On the cash gender bond, we were active in supporting some of the listing costs there. And more broadly, we've been quite actively involved in the power sector, working with our colleagues at InfraCo Asia to do feasibility work around commercial and industrial rooftop solar activities, where best to site, where is most demand. And then finally, perhaps I should mention the work that we've been doing, again, through GuarantCo for a number of years with Pay Electric, who will be speaking this afternoon, where we've been very honored to be able to support them on their safety awareness program, which is multi-pronged, but I think the most impactful part of that is the way that they've been training women electricians to basically go into households in Karachi to educate and build awareness around electrical safety, both at the household level, but also a very exciting schools outreach program where through funding that we've partially provided, Pay Electric has been able to educate children from 6 to 12 years old on the dangers of electricity and particularly things like illegal connections. So the program we're very proud of, and it kind of demonstrates how technical assistance can be used not only at the start of a transaction, but also on an ongoing basis to create additional impact in the projects that we support. So I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I think so far the conversation which we have heard, there are a couple of things I would like audience to pick up, and after asking one question to Maheen, I would like to come back to you as well. The world is evolving and we are transitioning from very conventional processes to new processes, whether we are talking about infrastructure, energy, or the financial instrument. Dr. Ishaq picked up a very interesting part this morning is in a social capital trust is the one which is a key motivator. And these guarantees and these innovative financial instruments help us to build those collaborations. So I would definitely ask you to think about what key learnings we can pick up from this esteemed panel. They are not there every day. That's a very rare opportunity that the entire panel is sitting in front of us, where we have got the technical assistance, we have a guarantee side of it, we have got the equity and the private capital mobilization strategy and the business development people, and we have got the leadership sitting at the same time there. So I think that's a rare opportunity, and I encourage everybody to ask some questions which can provide a clarification and create those collaborations for your own project or people you are working with, right? So these questions will help to clarify a lot of other things which people may have in mind, but they are not courageous enough to ask right now. This opportunity is rare, avail it. So Maheen, coming to you, Pakistan not an easy mark, right? It's not an easy mark. Being a female leader, it becomes more difficult in some areas when you are talking about the financial side. Our conventional side is a very, very different. And when we are talking about the collaboration, this is something which you are bringing to the table. Number one, it's innovative. Number two, people really have to understand it better and then collaborate in terms of to enable that. So either as a client side, as an investor side, or as a supporter side, they can do that. You have gone through a very big success story from a gender bond perspective that was talked in the morning as well. So if you look at the journey of the InfraZamin, so where the opportunity lies, where the challenges are, how you really overcome that, how the collaboration is happening between the insurance sector, between the banking sector, between the fund side of it, between InfraZamin, and then the people who really need that fund, how aware they are to really use these kind of opportunities.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you, Sajeed, and thank you, Nutshell, and Asfar for having me here again today. It's always a pleasure. I think you're very right. We have an incredibly unique panel here. We have representation from the equity arm, you have representation from the guarantee arm, you have representation from the technical assistance arm, and you have really what you have is an ecosystem that has been put together to develop that very thing which Hock talked about, which is confidence. And I think it's best demonstrated when we look at why we need confidence in the Pakistan market. The financial system is very large. It's very stable. Our banking system subscribes to some of the best and tightest regulation that we actually have in Asia. But somehow, the banks are not able to really develop that confidence to lend to infrastructure or climate or green projects like we need to. Our total private sector lending is about 17% to GDP. India and Bangladesh are in the 50 to 60% of lending to GDP. So we have a long way to catch up. And one of the ways that we can develop that catch up is through collaborations that you see on the stage here and collaborations with the country. And I think let me demonstrate this, and it's easiest perhaps understood as an example, is if we look at what the gender bond achieved beyond just developing a bond which came to the private sector here to invest in. It was done on the back of a full guarantee wrap. We got in the private sector to invest, but it's not just, the story didn't end there for KHOO. After that, KHOO was able to raise double the financing, again from the local and the international market, and most likely over next year may just go to the international market also to raise an international bond as well. So see the pathways that were opened up because someone was willing to take a bet. And I think it just comes down to that. Do we have the confidence to take that bet? And as InfraZamin, what we have been doing is identifying good projects, good companies, and saying, how can we take this to the financing market, either through equity or through guarantees, which is what we do, and allow banks the opportunity to develop that confidence in those companies so that they can raise the financing which they need for their own growth needs. And, you know, we've aligned sort of our company goals with the country goals, which is looking at sectors which the finance minister talked about this morning, which is agriculture, energy, sustainability, and climate. Right? As an incredibly climate vulnerable country, it's not just about building multiple solar panels. It's like, what happens when there is a flood? What happens to those solar panels? Can they be resilient to that kind of climate event? And so more and more we are transitioning and building our portfolio and our pipeline towards such projects that we can support, that cover all the areas that you're seeing over here on stage. And so enable good companies to raise financing to become great companies. Because the private sector is really the one that has to develop the projects and take the country forward. I think we need to stop continuously relying on fiscal space to give us that, because that has now shrunk.
No, thank you. I think I'll come to audience. Any question so far before we move on? Please. Yeah, so please, lady there. Yeah. Okay. Can we get a mic? Yeah, but I think the online audience may not be able to. Can we get a mic there? Okay, let me do that.
Hello, and thank you very much for being here. My name is Amir Masood, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm here. So my question is sort of a two-part thing. One is, how do you actually quantify confidence beyond that which is just an emotional reaction? But what would you call confidence? What is it that you require? And secondly, being a lawyer, I'd be interested to know your view as to whether you feel that the Pakistani legal system has been able to support infrastructure development, especially capital coming from outside. Actually, it's directed to Maheen and also Mr. Boo.
Okay. I'll take a crack at the confidence bit. So again, our guarantees, when we issue them, are irrevocable, and they're payable on a credit event. So it's different for every project, but effectively, if your underlying project fails to pay, we will pay. It's just that simple. And it's not something that is just for Pakistan. We've done that across 20 odd countries. And we have had guarantees calls. Actually, GuarantCo, that has been working here since I think 2013, has not had a single guarantee call on the Pakistan market, right? Which demonstrates a lot of confidence and success and why we want to do it. And interestingly enough, across the neighborhood, we have had guarantee calls. But the confidence we give is that we pay every single time there is a guarantee call, right? So as an investor, as a creditor, you are protected as far as the guarantee covers you. So that's essentially the element of confidence that we bring. And maybe I'll let Hock before I address the legal system point. Yeah?
Just supplement your answer. I think it's useful to give up the shop. Okay, the secret recipe of a guarantor is simple. We filter, so the good actors come through, the bad actors, you become good. Okay, we structure the transaction with guidelines and governance in place. Make sure you behave as per our expectation, and then we monitor against that. Just 3 steps, and then we put a guarantee on top of it. People say the de-risking happens with a guarantee. The risk goes away with the guarantee, but it doesn't. It goes to us. And then we manage it with these 3 simple steps. That's the secret recipe of a guarantor. No, not rocket science. And we try to proliferate what we do throughout the market. And people can then take the same steps and support these projects that sign up to the standards, govern themselves as expected, and then money flows with confidence. Right? So we don't really measure by percentage, we measure by standards. So we want to set a very high standard. So people say InfraZamin is very selective, rightfully so, because we want a neighborhood of high standards. We don't want people defaulting in our portfolio, and we would have failed as a guarantor. So the myth about guarantors de-risking is often saying with the guarantee, the risk disappears. We're not magicians. We just say, okay, the risk disappears. But we take steps behind us to do that. That is our secret recipe. It's not so secret now. That's what everyone should be taking, right? On the legal context, I am not a lawyer. I did not read law. But I've worked in the whole Southeast Asian region, and we've even supported people from Laos and Myanmar, right? And legal systems are, challenging in many of these markets, but we've, as a trust fund, Asian Development Bank, what we did was we relied on arbitration. So if a country is a signatory of the New York Convention, then you can go through private sector contracts with arbitration as the central decision-making resolution, right? Or central mechanism for dispute. And if everybody respects arbitration awards, then you are one step further than that, rather than going to courts within the country. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. And I think the part which I will pick up from there is the standards which you set, and the rest of the company try to achieve those as well when they see a one going in a success, like the Kashaf having a guarantee and a 5 times more capital coming from the other side because of the standards which you really define and they have achieved. Please.
Okay, from the lawyer to the engineer now. I'm Engineer Mansoor Malik. I'm co-founder of Pakistan Aerospace Council, a high-tech voluntary organization. My question is to Mr. Emilio. You gave tech inputs to KE. Would you throw some light on that, and what has been the scorecard for that? How long did you take to implement your technical inputs to KE, and what has been the scorecard so far?
So the relationship with KE arose through a guarantee that GuarantCo provided to them some years back. And as we developed that relationship, it became apparent that we could perhaps do more to support some of these very beneficial, impactful programs of the company. I believe the first phase of the Roshni Baji program started about 3 years ago. And in that first phase, if I recall correctly, they brought 80 women electricians through graduate school, effectively 1-year training program. And they came out of that sort of qualified to be able to make some of the more critical but more straightforward repairs to the domestic installations. But it was more than just that. It was also a program to ensure that they had the tools to be able to explain what the dangers are of electricity, and particularly in the context of illegal connections, and why, it is important to ensure that that the illegal connections are avoided. Obviously, that also had a commercial benefit to the company, because that would bring more people into sort of metered usage. Because that first program was sort of quite successful, we work with them in terms of developing the second phase, which is currently being completed, which I think is another 100 women electricians going through the training. But we also expanded it during that period of time to some of these other outreach programs, particularly with schools. We monitor this very closely. We have a quarterly and then a much more detailed yearly monitoring process, where we basically see what the impacts have been, not only on the women that have gone through this program, but also, we look at things like, reduced accidents and fatalities in the home. So we take it right down to, what the end result of all this activity should be. So it's been going for about 3 years now, and, we'll hopefully continue to have the relationship with them as they move forward with new initiatives.
Thank you, Emilio. Great question. I think this is the one which is an important element, not what we are doing, but how we are measuring that is important. Will you want to add something on KE?
I think the point I'd like to make on K Electric, so I was part of the original due diligence team that came to look at that transaction, and what we found was a counterparty that wanted to do more, right? A company that didn't just look at the distribution infrastructure and the cabling that needed to be put in place. It really wanted to improve its health and safety record. It really wanted to improve its gender impact, right? And through the technical assistance that we were able to mobilize, we were able to enhance what they were already doing. So it wasn't an imposition on us. It was us trying to help K Electric do more. And I think that's the way to do it. It's to feed off the great work that's already been done.
Thank you. We will come back to audience again. Yeah. Here. Here.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, my name is Fatma. This question is for the panel. Anyone can answer this. But Philip, you said that Pakistan is unique in so many ways, more so than other countries. And I'd like to know how so. I mean, you've been working here for several years. And Maheen, you say this panel is unique and is representative of an ecosystem. And we should take advantage of this panel. So I'd like to know in what ways Pakistan is unique. And I'd like both of you to answer the question, how is Pakistan unique in this aspect? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Look, I'm going to build on that to the legal question that was asked, right? And being a perspective on lawyers and bankers. You're an accountant, fantastic. So I'm talking about the experience I have had of interacting with people in financial services on the legal accountancy and banking side. Do not underestimate the sophistication in this market. The ability to understand complex structured finance transactions with guarantees is far beyond most of the countries that GuarantCo and the PIDG invests in, right? Which is fantastic. For us and for me, and it's made an incredibly enjoyable experience to work here. What really upsets me is that there's not more people like me here, right? And we have to ask ourselves why, right? And unfortunately, the number one reason when it comes to infrastructure is the foreign exchange problem, right? And I think that is why mobilizing local currency I come back to is really important. I'd also like to, if I may, just crowbar climate and nature into this on the back of your question, because I think it's another area which Pakistan is uniquely positioned in a new wave of capital that is starting to flow around the world, okay? So we all know that Pakistan is one of the most vulnerable countries on the planet. This was demonstrated in the 2022 floods. And it's uniquely positioned in terms of its size, its land mass, its geography, its climate, in being a solution to the climate crisis. We've seen some great examples in Pakistan, such as the Zephyr Power Project. It was a wind farm down in Sindh province, which has used mangroves to protect the foundations of the wind turbines instead of erecting huge concrete walls, okay? We're also seeing for the first time large-scale nature-based solutions being developed in this country, which are seeing flows of hard currency from the carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets at this point, flow into Pakistan with no associated outflow of hard currency. Hard currency is coming in, carbon credits are going out. This is unique, this is new, and it's incredibly powerful. But Pakistan has to capitalize on this. And at the moment, there are 22 countries which have signed bilateral agreements with mainly Japan, Switzerland, Singapore, and the Scandinavian countries under Article 6 of the Paris Climate Change Agreement. And this is the mechanism through which the carbon market is going to operate. Pakistan is not one of those 22 countries, right? It needs to be. It needs to get its carbon regulations in place so this flow of capital can increase and increase dramatically. Because if Pakistan doesn't do it, this capital is going to go elsewhere, okay? And Pakistan is uniquely, because of the sophistication in the financial infrastructure, the lawyers, the accountants, the bankers, Pakistan really can attract that capital because it's immune from foreign exchange risk, right? So there are things that we need to focus on and capitalize on moving forward in this climate and infrastructure.
So are you saying we're not trying hard enough?
I'm not saying... I think there are a lot of good people. I like the cheeky smile that's come with that question. There are a lot of very good people trying to do a lot of good work here in Pakistan, and I think it's important that the international investment community supports those actors to do more.
Thank you, Philip. And lovely blending the carbon accounting to the question coming from the accountant. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, there's a question. We can take one, and I think Ehsan Saab is already there, so we can take one question, and then we will close the session.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. I'm an exporter. I export rice. First of all, thank you to Maheen and the team. I must say, wherever you mention the gender bond globally, there's such a boost to Pakistan's perception. So well done, team. Thank you so much for that. My question is, there is, of course, a lot of opportunity that you've been tapping in the urban side. Any projects in the pipeline for the rural side? You know, whether it is the gender side of women or it's the supply side in a dairy chiller supply chain or others, because that's the much needed gap we're looking for.
Thank you, and thank you for your kind words. So on the rural side, agriculture is a segment that we are very heavily focused on. And we're looking at 1 or 2 projects that will be very transformative in terms of the corporate farming areas that we are trying to pilot. Now, those should serve as blueprints. If they manage to get done, they should serve as blueprints for more corporate farming to happen in Pakistan and really change the equation of what we're doing in agriculture. So that is a big focus area for us. The other thing we're trying to do is fill a need or a gap in the market which relates to short-term credit. What we've talked about here is very long-term credit. These are long-term projects, 10 years, 15 years. So we're seeing where, as an exporter, you're an exporter, there are also importers in the same frame that are fulfilling very important aspects. We're trying to see if we can also help them import against guarantee frameworks, as long as it fits within our mandate as well, because that will allow a certain cycle to begin running as well, which is very, very important. I'll close out by addressing the point on why Pakistan is unique. I think ultimately we're very unique because we're the 5th largest country in the world in terms of population. Our contribution on the world stage is negligible, and yet we have so many resources available to us, but we just cannot seem to believe enough in ourselves to get them to the point of that actualization. And I think ultimately Phil is very right. There are not enough foreign investors looking at Pakistan. Can we change that equation? Of course, but it will require a concerted effort of the private sector, the government, the whole lot to really come together and change that concept. I think ultimately we have to believe that we are not so terrible, perhaps, as we make ourselves out to be, and we have a lot of good qualities that can help push that forward. Correct. Yes.
So thank you very much, and thank you for the audience to really participate. It's important that we ask those questions. We welcome them. And the most important thing, they are still around, so that you can really interact and network with them at lunch and the tea time. But do interact. Collaboration is something which is a key. When we say we are unique, we have opportunity, that opportunity can only be delivered through those collaboration, and be open for the innovative solutions which are available around the world and how we can really build upon that. So there's a lot of knowledge base, a lot of guidance which is available, and there's a lot to collaborate on with InfraZamin and their overall global team at the same time. So thank you very much for your presence, and thank you very much for being great panelists. Thank you very much, guys.